Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me. If you have difficulties with sound, please feel free to send in send in for help through our chat function. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today at our Hawaii Women in Tech series, brought to you by the Hawaii Technology Development Corporation, in short, HTDC, the Entrepreneurs Sandbox, and the True Initiative. My name is Ellen Ng, and I am the Economic Development Specialist at HTDC. So some quick introductions to the organizations behind this effort. HTDC is a state agency attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. Our mandate is to grow the tech economy and workforce here in Hawaii. The Entrepreneur Sandbox is a co-working facility in Kaka'ako, owned by HTDC and managed by our operating partner, Fox Jelly. If you have not visited the space before, I encourage you to do so once the lockdown is over. The True Initiative is a joint effort among the public and private sectors, together with the state of Hawaii, to encourage knowledge sharing and the adoption of technology and best practices to create a resilient and thriving Hawaii. The True Initiative is an extension of the Hawaii Executive Collaborative. And if you're interested in to learn how you or your organization can be part of the True Initiative, please visit hec.org/true, TRUE. So some housekeeping before we dive in. Feel free to send in your questions during the session through the Q&A function. It's located at the bottom of your screen, I believe. Selected questions will be addressed during the Q&A portion after our interview with Jamie. There will also be a survey link sent out to you, so we would really appreciate it if you could complete it for us so that we can do and create better webinars for you in the future. Today, we have the privilege of speaking to Jamie Frady, UX UI lead designer in the digital strategy team at Central Pacific Bank. Jamie is from Seattle and now calls Hawaii home. Her corporate experience is focused on delivering user-centric technologies for digital platforms. Prior to Hawaii, Jamie worked for leading companies in Seattle on exciting projects such as the Xbox with Microsoft and with a company, Avalara, basically a tax compliance automation software company. She's also a JavaScript developer, having graduated from DevLake here in Hawaii. Jamie is passionate about delivering designs that are customer-centric while delivering business goals. She volunteers her time on the board of the AIGA Honolulu chapter as its digital director and is excited to contribute to the growth of the UX UI community here. Jamie was also an organizer for the GSCon Hawaii conference in 2019, the first year of the conference. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Jamie for taking the time to speak with us today. Hey, Jamie.
Hey.
Great, thanks for joining us today. You look really cool in your, black outfit and really sharp.
Thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here.
So Jamie, I think just to kind of kick it off, can you just share with us a little bit about your role at Central Pacific Bank as its UX UI lead designer?
Sure, yeah. I joined Central Pacific Bank in February of last year. I am working on the digital strategy team and specifically RISE 2020 initiatives to help modernize the bank and introduce some new digital products.
So I think one thing that is interesting for me, and I feel like a lot of people don't really understand, what is UX UI? Can you share with us what is that whole thing about and how is it relevant to technology?
Yeah, so UX UI stands for user experience and user interface. Basically what that means is I make products usable for people. In my experience, those products have been websites, those products have been applications, and how that works for a business is I help a business bring that product to the customer and make sure the customers are happy to use it.
So, what is a typical day for you in office like as it's, doing UX UI?
One of the interesting things about UX UI is every day is different. It's been a little bit different since we've been working from home. I usually wake up early, wake up, feed the cats, do my morning meditation, and then I start taking calls, my morning call at 8:30. Today I'm writing FAQ questions. Yesterday I presented a demo, and some days I'm preparing for a user experience test. What I really like about it is it's different every day.
How is it different now that you're working from home? Is it more difficult because there are less opportunities to collaborate face to face, or you don't see a difference at all?
I love working from home. I'm really lucky in that I have a really nice place where I can work, and it's not like there's a lot of noise at my house. I get to have my 2 little cat coworkers by my side all day. So
Yeah.
it hasn't been bad. And actually, maybe a month ago, we ran our first completely virtual user experience test.
Oh, okay. How did that go? Was it?
It went
smoother?
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't. Sometimes when you run a user experience test, you invite people to a location they've never been before, and that can be troublesome, trying to pay for parking, trying to find the right room. I think in this experience, a lot of people are figuring out how to use Zoom. So it was a software that people were familiar with, and super easy that, and I think people are more excited to participate because they didn't have to leave their house.
Yeah. Well, for those who are watching us today, Jamie actually works out of the Central Pacific Bank office here at the Entrepreneurs Sandbox. So, as much as I know you like working from home, I really hope that, we'll see you again here.
I do miss being able to see everybody at the Sandbox for sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it was great seeing you yesterday, even though it was like just, 5 seconds when you were coming by to meet with Manny and so on. So I think, what is interesting for a lot of people that I've spoken to here in Hawaii is, of course, I mean, you shared a little bit about what UX UI is, but how did you, get into UX UI? Is there like a traditional path to get in it, or could you share how did you end up being in UX UI?
I don't think user experience as its own job is old enough to have a traditional path. I think people who've come to user experience have come to it from all different ways. I didn't even know what user experience was before I had my first job as a user experience designer.
So maybe if you could share like your background, like how do you fall into, from school and your choices and so on?
Yeah, so I graduated from college in Seattle and with a graphic design degree. But I was always really interested in technology. I took my extracurricular classes were in app design and website design. And I had a friend who already had graduated. Actually, she wasn't even a friend. I wasn't even aware that she knew me. But she had got a job for MicrosoftStore.com. And she had graduated maybe a year ahead of me, and she had put my name in, so I went in for the interview and started working on that team, and that's when I learned what user experience was.
Yeah, so it wasn't kind of something that they talked about in school, I guess.
I don't think that
potential pathway.
It was, yeah, I don't think that it was as prolific or as it wasn't as mature enough to be taught in classes when I went to college, I would say. Maybe in some places, but definitely not in the small school that I went to. Yeah, I mean, I had no idea what it was. I suppose there was an environmental design class where we talked about user experience, but it was like how to design an elevator that works, not applications.
So, if someone, if a student came up to you today, or someone, who's thinking of transitioning, and they're asking, hey, Jamie, if I want to be a UX UI designer, what kind of skill sets would I have to develop on the side? Design skill sets, or?
I think it's really important. Well, so there are two different sides to design, right? as a user experience designer, I do both UX and UI, which means it's important for me to have a design eye and understand the principles of visual design so that I can implement my changes. If you're looking for a role that is very specific, just research-based, then you really are going to want to hone in on interview skills. I think that there are, I like to look at Nielsen Norman group to kind of use that as a kind of a level for how I might run a test. So familiarize yourself with that. And I think empathy is really important, being able to listen.
Listen to clients and listen to your customers, I would say.
Listen to, well, in my job, it requires that I be able to listen and understand the business need. So I have to be savvy and understand what it is that the business is trying to accomplish, and then understand what it is that the user is trying to accomplish in that. And sometimes these things are unspoken. So if you're running a user, one of the funniest things that happens in user experience is you'll ask somebody, how was it? And they'll go, it's great. But the whole time they were going through the flow, they're cursing and clicking the wrong stuff. So it's important to be able to pay attention, not just to what a person says, but what a person has done and maybe what they're not saying.
So kind of like the subtleties of human behavior.
Yeah.
In that way. So, I mean, you've worked in teams with other UX UI designers. Do you happen to know, some of, you came from a graphic design background. How about the people you have worked with? Like, do you know, what were the paths they took to become a UX UI designer, or what were they studying in school? Or
I had a friend who has a degree in photography that I used to work with. I also have friends who came from PM sides, so people who were focused on technology project management and just found themselves really liking to get involved in the user side. So I think there's also an opportunity for developers with a design sense and an interest in how people behave. So I think if you're involved in technology already, you just have to have the will and voice that desire, right? If you're coming from a different background, I think it's being able to show your interest and your capability. I think that user experience is a skill set that a lot of businesses have and don't really, or is a skill set that a lot of businesses want. And without the money to hire a full-time user experience designer, you're really going to have to pay for expensive outsourcing. So if you have a team member who is interested in doing it, then I think it's worth a shot. I mean, the user experience test I just ran cost $250.
Oh, wow. And how many people were involved in that test?
5. So when you're doing usability testing, typically you find so the number of users required to find all of the flaws is like 15. But you find the most flaws in 5. So what I like to do is I run 3 stages of testing. So 5, fix all of those issues, then another 5, find the new issues and fix those. But you only really need to ask 5 people.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what's interesting, the last time I spoke with you, when we talked about UX UI, you seem really excited. So maybe you can share a little bit about what excites you about UX UI. What is it about your job that keeps you,
I really like tinkering. I like people. I think if I weren't a user experience designer, I would be in psychology. The 2 regrets I have is psychology. I would have gone to school to be a psychologist, or I would have gone to school to be a software engineer. And user experience is kind of the perfect marriage of those. So I like tinkering. I like being able to see the immediate results, right? It's really gratifying to say, oh, if we move this here, people, it's so much easier for people, and being able to see that actually happen.
Mm-hmm. So I think one thing that was also awesome was when we were talking, you shared that you started your career at Microsoft, which is a great company,
Yeah.
right? What are some of the most memorable lessons you picked up as a UX UI? Or maybe you can share a little bit about what you did at Microsoft and what were some of the lessons that you learned that were memorable for you?
Yeah, starting at Microsoft early in my career or as my first job in this career, it really laid a really strong foundation for what my goals are. So Microsoft, of course, is a really big company, and they have to worry and make sure that their products are accessible for all users. And they're a target for lawsuits. So it was really important in our design to make sure that our products were accessible. And as I've continued in my career, I haven't seen that as much, or the emphasis on it as much. So being able to bring that experience into smaller companies and make sure
Mm-hmm.
that the websites are okay for colorblind people, or for people who may have vision issues,
Mm-hmm.
hearing issues, and so on.
What is one memorable lesson that you picked up at Microsoft that you have brought with you throughout your career since then?
I think Microsoft taught me to speak up for myself.
Yeah.
It's an environment where people have deadlines and goals, and they need to say what they feel to get things done. And so it really taught me that it's okay to voice my opinions, and if I don't voice them, then they'll just be mine.
Yeah. I think another interesting thing that you brought up during our earlier conversation was your time at Avalara and the importance of teamwork. Maybe, is there something that you can share around that?
Yeah, so if Microsoft taught me the foundation, Avalara gave me the family. My coworkers at Avalara were the best, and it really taught me how to work within a team. I learned Agile there, but just the culture of a company is so important, and can really make the difference for whether or not you're successful. My coworkers at Avalara were the witnesses at my wedding. Like, that's how close
Oh,
everybody
okay.
was.
Wow, that's nice. So, I mean, it must have been hard for you then, to move from Avalara in Seattle to Hawaii because your husband was, is in the military, right? And we talked a
Yeah,
little bit about the challenges, in our earlier conversation. Could you just share a little bit about, the challenges you faced, being a military spouse and kind of the strategies or the mindset that you had to undertake to get through that and to where you are today?
yeah. I mean, if we dig a bit deeper, right? I moved to Seattle from Montana. I was like, I'm gonna go to the city and I'm gonna be a career woman. And from the gate, it was I had my goal. I knew what I was doing. I was gonna find success. So from the age of 18, 19, that was my only focus. But when I met my husband, I felt like, or who would eventually be my husband, I felt like I had gotten my career, and it was something that I knew that I could get back. But what I didn't have was a partner. And so I knew that the user experience industry wasn't as big here in Honolulu. And I knew that moving from a tech hub was going to be really hard. But I didn't realize before I moved what kind of stigma there was for military spouses and people from the mainland. I
Mm-hmm.
think in Hawaii in particular, businesses are looking for people who want to join a company and be with a company for the rest of their life. Literally, an interviewer said this to me in one of my first interviews. He basically was like, we're looking for somebody who wants to die with this company. And that's just not me. And not to say that I don't want to be a long-term employee, but, you know, but that's beside the point. The point is when I told people that I was a military spouse, the immediate reaction is, oh, well, they're going to leave in 2 years. And actually, we're going to be here, it'll almost be 5 years, which I think is a good chunk of time. When I got here, the jobs I was getting requests for were development jobs. And I was indignant. I was like, those are completely different skill sets. But what I didn't realize was that the tech industry hadn't matured to the level of Seattle, and that the roles weren't separate as they might be in a more mature industry. So I learned how to code JavaScript.
Yeah, so you went to DevLink, right? You went through their program. I
did a 6-month part-time program. I graduated December, not this last December, but the December before that. And actually, it was kind of funny because as soon as I graduated in December, and then I got the request to come in and interview for Central Pacific Bank in January, and I really had to make the decision if I wanted to continue down this path of user experience or if I really wanted to pursue the JavaScript career from the beginning.
And then you it seems like you went down the path that you came on, which was more UX, UI, and design.
I did, but I don't regret learning JavaScript. One of the best directors I ever had actually at Microsoft was able to talk to the developers as if in development language and talk to designers in designer language. And that's what I want to be able to offer my team when I get to that point in my career. So I'm happy to have that skill set.
Yeah, so I think, you kind of answered one of the questions that, I think it's Ari, she's asking, she's like, does knowing how to code help with UX, UI design? And it seems like the answer is yes.
My answer is yes. I can't say that that's true for everyone, but because I focus so much on the interface portion, knowing how to code has really helped. I don't know. I mean, maybe the developers think it's annoying when they say they can't do something and I'm like, oh, really?
Yeah. Prove them wrong.
But being able to talk to a specific problem in somebody's language is really important and really helpful. So if that's a tool you have in your kit, or an opportunity to build that tool, I consider myself a lifelong learner. Like I'm always tinkering on something. So if you are a person who's interested in things and you have the time and energy to learn coding, go for it.
Yeah. So besides coding as a skill set, what other skill sets or attributes you think would be or have been most valuable in your career?
My lack of filter is particularly helpful for me. I think being able to fight for my customers and for the information that I found and for the beliefs that I have has been really integral. But I also think being able to listen is important too. Design, listening, time management.
Yeah, I think this one actually falls in really well with one of the questions that came in from Nicole. She's asking, she's like, what are 3 skills you wish you had learned or developed earlier in your career? I mean, you talked about, being able to listen better. Probably that's one.
I think there have been times where in my career where I wish I would have been, I don't know, I'm very passionate. And sometimes that passion can become too much. So making sure that I'm always thinking about the health of the team and the people that I'm working with I wish I had made that forefront sooner. I think being able to admit when you're wrong is really
That's always
important.
a hard one.
I mean, these are all soft skills, right? Like
Yeah.
I think if so much of work has to do with working with the people, not necessarily delivering a specific product. Like if you have a design eye and you can listen to people and, you know, do a job, you know, the hard part is being on a team.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I think I want to move on a little bit about kind of challenges as a woman working in technology, right? And I think we talked a little bit about that in our prior conversation. Maybe we can just, if you can just share a little bit about one or two challenges that you faced during your time at the companies that you work for.
Yeah, I think there have been a few instances where I've noticed being a woman maybe led me to being treated differently. There was a case where I had a disagreement with the developer about, basically I had written the documentation and I had written and delivered the design, and we had a disagreement that about how this particular design should perform. And I feel like when management stepped in to help us, it was more like, okay, yeah, you just sit down and we'll ask somebody else to do it next time. But it was my work, and I knew the answers. But I think that's why I say standing up for yourself is one of the most important things in my career, because if I've never let anybody tell me what my intentions were. I'm going to add this to actually the list of things that are important. If I could just backtrack a little bit. I think it's really important to be able to negotiate. A lot of times in design, we have a particular idea of what is perfect and what the goal is, but there are technical challenges to that, and you can't accomplish everything that you want. So you have to prioritize what's important to the customer and what's going to actually make the impact. And you have to be able to negotiate that with your team. But going back to the being a woman in tech, people have argued with me, or I've been called a hothead, or, things that I think men who are assertive in their roles don't get called. I think also it's just the environment. There are a lot of things that haven't happened directly to me, but have happened to the women around me. Women being told that they got a job because they're pretty, or they, they're only succeeding because they did such and such vulgar thing. Living in that kind of environment, it makes you fearful, and that you're vulnerable. You're always vulnerable to that. And there's no one solution to stuff like that. And there's no one solution to being treated differently because you're a woman. My approach is to face it, right? Say, I don't think this is right. In cases where people have said directly to me, oh, she got that job because she's pretty, my reaction is, you don't know anything, and just to respond to that how I would want somebody to respond to me. But I think that we all have responsibility in this, and it's not about demonization. I think anybody who's ever crossed me in this way didn't do it because they're a bad person. I think a lot of people just don't understand the consequences of their actions, right? So being able to say, hey, the way that you said that actually isn't cool. And in a way that doesn't alienate them, right? Because what we want is we want people to be better. We don't, and to be aware of how their actions affect people. But we don't want them to just like give up.
Yeah, it's always a fine line, right? A balance between standing up for yourself and being perceived in a certain way, but making sure what you do is right. So, on that note, I kind of want to shift gears a little bit and talk about, we have people asking here through chat and the Q&A, what are some of the tips you would give to women and of course the men who are interested, who want to enter the field of UX UI or become a UX UI designer?
Do your research, figure out what it is about user interface that you want to do. Do you want to interview customers? Do you want to do data analytics? Do you want to do the design portion? Get, practice that. Find opportunities to do it in your spare time. One of the things that I wish I had more opportunity to do is physical design, like printed design. So when I participated in the JavaScript conference, I did all of the print materials. And so that's things that you can find outside of your job that, or maybe volunteer work or whatever, but give you an opportunity to get better at these things, right?
Yeah. So I think on that note, it's really interesting because I know that you serve as the digital director for the Honolulu AIGA chapter, right? So if you could share a little bit about, the motivation for you to be part of that group and what you do as the digital director for that group.
Yeah, so I have been the digital director for AIGA for about a year. I joined because I am really interested and passionate about building and growing the user experience community in Hawaii, and beyond that, the tech community. I think there are starting to be these little bubbles, little pops of interest in user experience, but there's no community here to grow that and talk about it. How do I handle this problem? How do I handle that problem? So what I want to do is start growing the footprint here and get people talking about it. I don't consider myself fancy. Like, I don't feel like I'm particularly the leader of user experience in Hawaii, but I care, and I do know a little bit, and I know enough to help and at least start the conversation. I think you and I had talked about before the importance of technology in Hawaii. In Hawaii in particular, I mean, with this COVID epidemic, we're seeing the importance of not necessarily relying on the tourist economy. And I think that it's so hard for people to live here, right? I mean, I have a friend who works full-time as a teacher, runs an Airbnb, and bounces at a bar on the weekend just to make ends meet. And I think technology is an industry that happens to have higher than average salaries. And the people here can really benefit from that. And it's not like there aren't people on this island who can afford to fund these kinds of startups, just like San Francisco.
So I think, with what you shared, I want to bring in one of the questions from the audience. So Carmen, I think Carmen's asking, beside probably you mentioned AIGA Honolulu chapter. So Carmen, maybe you want to check that out, but are there any other resources that you think would be helpful for a career transition to UX UI in Honolulu? So she says that she tried looking for groups in Meetup, but didn't have any luck. Do you recommend joining boot camps?
I've never been in a user experience boot camp, so I can't say on that particular topic, but I think it's never harmful to take an opportunity to learn. I think if you are looking for a community and you don't see it, that's an opportunity to start that kind of community, right? If you want to have a coffee UX group where you can talk to people, start one, and hopefully, maybe one person shows up, maybe two people show up, but also, you know, part of the community that we're trying to build in AIGA is a larger community that isn't, you know, historically AIGA was just graphic design, but we're trying to build that larger community where user experience designers and project managers and people on all ends of this idea of design can come together. I think last year around this time, I hosted a Cocktails with Creative UX meetup. So, and a lot of people showed, which tells me that if you host a meetup, people will come.
So I think, Carmen, you heard that. So, you know, keep an eye out for AIGA Honolulu chapter. I think once COVID passes, hopefully you guys will be up and running again with, you know, other more fun activities. So, you know, one of the things that I also wanted to talk about is, you know, as women technologists, right? I mean, it's growing, the community is growing, but how do you think we can be a better role model for the future generation?
I think that when I was coming up in my career, everybody has their own idea of what is the right way to make it, what is the right way to get to a leadership position, what is the right way. But I think what I want to leave behind for the next generation is the importance of choosing your own life. If it makes you really excited to work on a project that has crazy deadlines and, you know, you just give it 120% and then take a week off after your product launches, if you can, you know, or as soon as you can, then do that. If you want to take an easy job, or not easy, but like if you want a job that's not as stressful and just kind of has like a routine thing, do that. You know, I think it's really important for us as we come into these time of leadership in our careers to talk about a whole life, not just a career, right? My job, if I'm suffering in my career, I'm going to be suffering at home. And it's important. So it's important for me to have balance, right? And be able to draw the lines and say, no, I don't want to host this, or yeah, I really do want to host this meetup. And I think that this is important. I want to do that.
Okay. So, you know, as a UX UI designer, I mean, trends are always changing, you know, new tools are coming up. How do you keep, you know, up to date with the latest developments in UX UI?
Like I said, I keep an eye on Nielsen Norman. Basically, step one of any project that I work on is going to research the specific steps of that project. So what are the most recent studies on forms? What are the most recent studies on buttons? You know, and then start from there. But also I am, you know, I'm a technologist in my personal time as well, right? Like I'm always trying different apps or trying to check out this cool new feature on Instagram or whatever. So just being aware of my surroundings.
And what inspires you? I mean, I'm sure being a job that's involved in creatives, right, or creation, what keeps you inspired?
Well, I think that there are two things. So sorry, my cat is just jumping from my table.
It's okay. She can join us if she wants.
I think that there are a couple things that inspire me. First of all, working for a bank specifically, I'm inspired in being able to create a situation that helps people live a better life here. We talked about how hard it is to live in Hawaii, and I think the work that I do every day focuses on that, is how do we make life easier for people? Because finances are such the core of stress and depression and burden, right? And then for me, particularly in user experience, I get really excited when I see a friend using an app that doesn't work or a website that doesn't work. And I'm like, oh, I could fix that, right? And that just keeps that part of me inspired that I'm actually doing this for people, for real people who are standing on the sidewalk trying to figure out how to rent a bike, you know?
Mm-hmm. Between you and me and the people in this, the audience today, are you one of those people who leave like feedback about UX UI on like the reviews for apps and that kind of
Oh my
stuff?
God. I just, before this, got a response back. I had emailed this app. It's a luxury resale app called The Real Real. And I
Oh
was
yeah.
like, oh, your filter doesn't work. And they were like, oh, have you tried a different browser? And I was like, it's the app. Like,
Oh wow.
after going back and forth with them for a few times, I
Mm-hmm.
try to leave feedback in the way that I would to a developer. Like, this is the product I'm on. This is the issue I'm having. These are the steps to recreate.
I
But
completely understand where you're coming from. I do that with e-commerce all the time too. Like this is the checkout button is not whatever, right? So
right.
when your passion kind of fuses with, whatever you do outside of work and work, right? I think it
Right.
all comes
I'm like,
together.
hire me freelance. I will help you. Like,
Yeah. So
you
I
just need
think,
to
I
fit.
want to move over to some of the questions from the audience. I think they're pretty good questions that, warrant some answers from you. So Vince is asking, what kind of software tools do you use for UX UI development?
Before I knew how to code, prototyping software was really important. I particularly like Axure for prototyping. I know that InVision is a more popular version, and then I think that XD also is gaining some ground. I really like Axure because it has logic, and I tried to switch to XD, but it doesn't have hover states, which are really important for customers to understand if something's clickable or not. And the Adobe suite, Zoom for remote user experience tests. I've also had experience with this website called usertesting.com, which has basically you can access users to test something, and it allows you to do specific demographics. So I did a test on our website last year, and it took maybe 2 days just to get 5 responses, everybody from Hawaii.
So just for the benefit of the people here, like how do you spell the first two software tools that you mentioned? Axure?
Axure, A-X-U-R-E.
A-X-U-R-E. Okay. And the other one was?
InVision.
Oh, InVision. I see. Okay, that I think people know. And from Cyril, he's asking, would training or experience in psychoanalysis be beneficial in this line of work?
I don't have any training in psychoanalysis, so I can't speak to that. But
Okay.
probably.
I mean, like maybe, I don't know, I don't know. Understanding of human behavior, understanding of human.
I'm assuming that training in psychoanalysis helps you read people. And so that's important in user experience design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So I think you talked about this a little bit, but let's go a little bit deeper. So Curran is asking, with a degree in graphic design, how did you go about applying to jobs as a UX UI designer? Or if you have tips for people who's graduating with a degree in graphic design, because I know for you, someone recognized your potential and kind of pulled you into Microsoft. Yeah.
Locally, I think showing that you are interested in web design or digital-based design, I think that'll help. I think there are a lot more opportunities here to do web and print. So actually, I think coming from a graphic design background, it could be very helpful. Because a lot of schools force you to learn print as well. Those didn't, I don't know how to do print. So I think as a graphic, just expressing interest and pursuing that, right? This is what I think would work better for the Starbucks app, or, I think what I did when I was in college, my senior project was I built an app for a bike share, right? So that's what helped me is I just packed my portfolio. Every project I had a mobile solution as well, or a web solution, right?
Okay. This is a really interesting question from Nicole. She's asking, how do you show the value of user research to your stakeholders and get that buy-in when they just want better designs?
Yeah, well, I think that that's a really important question, because what we're talking about here is money, right? If you can prove that a user can check out faster or easier, or a user is more likely to click and be engaged for lead generation, all of that generates to dollars. So when you're talking to the business end, you're talking about this kept users on the website X% more, or X% more users clicked this checkout button, and that's going to benefit profits in such a kind of way. Right? It's that goes back to what I was talking about when you're speaking someone's language, right? When you're trying to get buy-in from people, you're talking about money.
Yeah, it's it's always about the bottom line, right? How much are you saving for them, or how much you're making for them, and
right? And it's not just results, right? We're talking production costs. Let's say that you go down. You build your website and you didn't do any user testing, and then after you launch and it's already all signed off and done, and you do user testing and you're like, oh man, if we had made this banner in this way, it would 50% more people would click it. And now you have to pay developers to go back and fix that. So if you fix it before it's sent at all, that saves money just in the project cost.
So I think another really interesting question that came in from Nicole, how do you see UX or UI growing in Hawaii in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think awareness, right? We start with awareness, and we start with people who do it as part of their job, right? Maybe you're a project manager or a product owner, and you're like, oh man, I just want to, you get permission to run one test, right? I'm gonna just ask customers this one time. And then you turn around, you show proof of the success of that and how it impacted the company, and you get a second test. And then somebody down the street is running their first test. And pretty soon the businesses start to realize, oh man, those 3 tests that Sally ran, they're really great, and they saved us a lot of money, and they really made our product better. We've got so many more users now. We should just make that Sally's job exclusively. And so it's just like little dominoes, right? Little one by one. So I think it starts with awareness, and it starts with finding people to just go out and do it. Just do one test.
Yeah. Okay, Anna is asking, do you know any good tools for whiteboarding?
Whiteboards?
Whiteboarding, do you even do whiteboarding?
I do whiteboarding. I like
pen and paper
markers.
What?
I like expo markers. I guess I don't understand what tools I would use with whiteboarding.
Okay. So Anna, if you have a follow-up question to that makes it a little bit easier for us to answer, feel free to send it in. Let's go on to Chase's question. He's asking, Jamie, what are your thoughts on unpaid internships for graduating students as a way to gain experience?
I don't think that it's okay to ask someone to work full-time for free.
Even if it's an internship, right?
Even if it's an internship. I have worked at locations where I've worked at businesses where I've seen there be interns for an entire year who worked full-time for free. I think because, and I'll tell you why, because that already sets a baseline where you have to be able to afford to work that much for free, which means that the only people that are going to be able to do that are people who are wealthy. And we don't want to create those kind of boundaries in our businesses, right? That being said, I did an unpaid internship when I was in college. I worked 8 hours a week for 3 months. And the most important thing in any industry is networking, right? And connection. Mm-hmm. Being able to point to somebody and say, this person thinks I do good work, right? So if you want to provide your services to gain your own experiences and build your network, it is your choice to decide what to do with your time. But yeah, I don't know. That's.
I mean, probably I think it really depends on each person's kind of priorities and their workload.
Yeah.
In school with their finances and so on. But it's probably a way for you to do 1 or 2 projects just to show that you have interest maybe and passion and the capability to do it. To just get your foot into the door. So let's go on to, I think Anna wrote back with that question that we were asking earlier. And I think to Anna's question, Nicole was sharing that she used Mural for whiteboarding. And I think Ruby mentioned that she used Mural and now Google has Jamboard. But what Anna was asking earlier was, how would you whiteboard with a team if everyone is working remotely? Is there an online whiteboard tool you'll recommend?
I have friends who have this window here, but I have friends who have a whiteboard in their background, and so I think that in my experience, that's the way I've whiteboarded remotely, is just have a whiteboard in the background. I did one time I built a prototype out of paper and filmed it and sent it to my team because I was like, oh, this is how I want this bar to behave. So I think any way you can find that works for your team and for you to communicate your meaning, do that. If that's some sort of drawing space, digital drawing space, yeah, whatever works. OneNote is kind of good, like collaboration tool as well. Any of the Google products that can show like multiple people making changes.
Cool. So Anna, I think some of the people in the audience are leaving recommendations for whiteboarding tools, so feel free to look at them. One other question from Nicole, she's asking, does your team at Central Pacific Bank do both research and design or just one or the other?
I do both.
I knew that the answer was going to come. So that's your answer, Nicole. Let's see. One other question from let's see. I thought it was one more. Who was asking? So Camila, she's asking, Jamie, is Central Pacific Bank or any other company offering summer internship opportunities?
I don't really deal with that particularly, but I do know my boss has mentioned interns several times, so I think that the answer is yes. And actually, we did have an intern last year. So I think, again, this is knowing the right people, right? So if you're interested in internship, contact me.
Okay, are you comfortable with us leaving your email out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We will leave your email. We will leave her email, Jamie's email in the chat later, so you can reach out to her if necessary. There is one last question from the audience before we let you go. Carmen, she's asking, any advice on finding a UX UI job here in Honolulu, knowing that opportunities are scarce? How did you find your role at CPB?
It's not really a fair answer. Somebody approached me about a role at CPB. I didn't find it, it found me. But like I said, I would take any role that allows you to work on digital products, whether that's a design role or a web development role or a management role. And then I would just eke my way in and offer solutions, just like you would anything in your toolbox, right? Like if you're a PM and you're like, oh, I know how to make this PM thing. You know, or I know how to work spreadsheets really well. If I, you know, I would just say, oh, I know I can run a user experience test just like you would anything else. And people turn and they'll go, how much money do you need? And you'll say, $250. There you go.
So kind of giving them a little bit of a breadcrumbs and getting them to bite, right? And then showing your full value after that.
Yeah, just offer it like it's normal. Like you would, you know, like you would expect the company to run user experience tests, and that's why they hired you.
Okay, hopefully, Carmen, that gives you a little bit of insight into how you could approach it. So before we let Jamie go, one final question from the team here at HTDC and True and the Entrepreneurs Sandbox. Give us one word you would like to leave the audience with today.
Truth.
Why?
I think it's important. I think, you know, it's truth in yourself. It's truth in your work. It's, you know, truth in your team, right? It's just like being real is the most important thing.
Great. Anyway, thank you, Jamie, for taking the time to speak with us today. It's, you know, it's a fun 1 hour as always chatting with you. We wish you all the best in, you know, all the work that you'll be doing with Central Pacific Bank and AIGA Honolulu. So thank you so much for taking time today. For the people in the audience, this session has been recorded. Remember to fill up the survey link, and we will be sending you the link to this recording as well. So keep a lookout in your inboxes. I will be leaving Jamie's email address in the chat. So feel free to reach out to her if you have questions or, you know, follow-up questions or other questions that we didn't answer today. Again, thank you so much, Jamie, and have a great rest of your week. We will hope to see you again at the Sandbox very soon.
Definitely.
Yep. Thank you.